Democratic Senator Jeanne Shaheen of New Hampshire joins us now. She is the ranking member of the Foreign Relations Committee and sits on Armed Services. Senator, not sure if you got to listen to that in real time, but in the playback there, what do you make of the President of the United States appearing to blame Minnesota, an American state, over a foreign enemy?
Well, sadly, it's typical of the way Donald Trump responds. He doesn't seem to appreciate the threat to our own national security. I just talked to a town manager in New Hampshire earlier today about how concerned they were and whether they'd heard anything from the federal government putting them on notice that they should worry about this. And he said, no, they hadn't gotten any message other than what was reported on the news. So it's egregious for the President of the United States to take the side of a sworn enemy of the United States over a state in this country.
There were so many things wrong, Senator, with that cabinet hearing, perhaps least of which was the fact that you have acting DNI Bill Pulte there, as well as Jay Clayton, who is Senate confirmed. I don't know how they're both able to be in the cabinet meeting. Do you have an understanding of who is in charge of DNI right now?
No, it's my understanding that Mr. Clayton has not been sworn in yet, even though he's left his previous job. And I assume that President Trump is trying to keep Bill Pulte where he is as long as he can to do as much damage to the department, DNI, and fire as many people and get access to whatever classified information the president wants as he can. And again, that is not in America's national security interest. That does not keep Americans safe.
The other notable acting head there was Todd Blanche. His nomination very much in limbo, as some Republicans, senators, they're currently outgoing. They're demanding he formally kill the president's anti-weaponization fund. The White House clearly not letting that happen. Do you think the Senate ultimately confirms Blanche?
Well, I hope not. It's outrageous that this administration is on the side of defending people who attacked police, who were trying to defend the Capitol, trying to defend Congress, that he wants them to be compensated when they were trying to overthrow the government. I mean, that is just unacceptable. And the people of this country should be outraged, not to mention the fact that he wants to be exempt from any future misconduct or corruption, which we're already seeing writ large through his administration. But for any non-compliance with the IRS on revenue to his businesses and his family in the future. That is not the way most Americans believe our country should work. Most Americans, and myself included, we believe that no one should be above the law, that no elected official should be above the law. And what Donald Trump is trying to do is put himself and his family and his business and his own interests ahead of the American people.
Senator, I don't know if you've heard this expression. We talk a lot about the YOLO caucus that includes Tillis, Cornyn, other senators who will not be returning either because they have decided not to run for re-election or because the president has supported their primary opponents. Of course, YOLO stands for you only live once. We nerds have decided it stands for either you only leverage once or you only legislate once. I am waiting to see the legislating happen, and I am sort of intrigued by where you have decided to put your effort in your final term in office, really going after a cap on insulin prices, $35. This is a bipartisan measure. Why this? Why does this feel so important and so urgent?
Well, I've co-chaired the Diabetes Caucus since I got to the Senate with Susan Collins. And I have a granddaughter who has type 1 diabetes, so I've had a very personal window into the challenges that people with type 1 face. And I know that for them, insulin is life or death. If people can't afford their insulin, if they cut it, it has huge health ramifications. And so we know that this works because we put a cap on insulin at $35 a month for Medicare 2 years ago. We've seen the benefits of that. We know that that saves other health complications. And so this is a way to help the more than 8 million Americans who are living with type 1, the millions more who have type 2 who need insulin. It's a way to help people who are overwhelmed with the cost of healthcare these days. And it has bipartisan support. We need to pass this. We need to get it done and help the millions of families until we can get to a cure for type 1. And that's the goal, to get to a cure for diabetes. But in the meantime, we need to make sure that people can afford their insulin.
When we talk about affordability, I think healthcare often gets forgotten in that conversation. Senator Jeanne Shaheen, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you.